Welcome, everyone. This is episode 63 of the Standing Eight podcast. We are back, and for the first time in a while, we have all the base panelists present. You got myself, Soriao from Los Angeles, Tommy Rhodes Jr. out in Texas, Cortney Tanner out in Georgia, and last but not least, Michael Gomes. Welcome back from New Jersey. And also joining us is our good friend, Tiffanie Daniels out in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Hey, guys.
Welcome. Who also represents Wyatt Promotions. Thank you all for joining us in this episode 63. We have a lot of boxing to talk about. Specifically, we'll be reviewing the Errol Spence versus Danny Garcia fight. Anthony Joshua's 9th round knockout victory of Kubrat Pulev, which potentially sets up a unification fight against Tyson Fury, and a quick preview of Canelo Alvarez versus Callum Smith. So first off, for the first segment, we got Errol Spence successfully defended his IBF and WBC welterweight titles against Danny Garcia, December 5th at the AT&T Stadium in Texas, by the way of unanimous decision. Leading up to the fight, there were concerns about Spence wanting to face a top caliber name after his long recovery off his car accident late last year. Some would have preferred, including myself and including most of you, to take a tune-up fight. But as we all saw, Spence virtually showed no signs of rust against Danny. And actually, in my view, he was as good as someone coming off a break, not going through the accident. Nothing seemed off about him from what I could tell. And much credit to trainer Derek James playing an integral part in Spence's preparation. As for the fight itself, it was pretty much apparent. Spence had a specific game plan tailored against Danny Garcia, spacing the stiff double jab followed by the lead left and making it a point to get out of range when he had to reset. As for Garcia, who is naturally a counter puncher, he really had a hard time trying to land anything against Spence. However, the times he did land, he did so significantly, which also answered another concern I had about Spence, which that he can indeed take those clean flush power shots, especially from one of the hardest punchers in the welterweight division. So since Michael Gomes hasn't been out for a while and he's back, let me get his assessment of the fight. So Michael, go ahead, man.
That was a tune-up fight. I have to say that I was completely wrong. I didn't pick Danny to win the fight, but I thought it would be a lot closer. Especially, I think people forget, and Errol has to count his blessings. He came from a devastating accident. Most people wouldn't walk away from that accident or be in the same athletic shape that he obviously showcased in the fight against Danny Garcia. So, many blessings to Errol for being able to come back looking like he did not skip a beat. My prognosis on the fight is more so on what's next for Danny Garcia versus, rather than what's next for Spence. We all know what's next for Spence. He made a huge statement against, an elite fighter. I was surprised that he was able to come into the fight and look as sharp as he has. One, he's been out of the ring for a long time. Two, again, a devastating accident. I actually replayed that accident the other day on YouTube, and I cringe every time I watch it. And to see him back in the ring perform at the magnitude that he did, and perform in, with so much pressure, because a lot of people, including myself and some of us here in the panel, we didn't think that he'd be able to come back in the ring. And we thought that some of the delay had to do with him, trying to find out, if he was going to be capable of fighting again. And I was wrong, completely wrong. I owe an apology to him. Was it Lamaj Brown from the group? He was ragging on me for a long time, and he was right. I was wrong. I just want the Spence versus Bud Crawford fight to happen now at this point. I think he's ready. I don't think there will be any excuses if Bud were to win. I don't know who wins that fight. I do lean towards Bud winning the fight because I just think that Bud is just a completely different animal than anything that Spence has faced. We have seen Spence against the ropes before, against Sean Porter. Not hurt, but in a tight fight. Many can say that if Sean doesn't get knocked down in the 11th round, that potentially it's a draw. That's how I would have had that fight. And we all watched Spence versus Kell Brook. I had Kell Brook winning the fight up until the moment he got hurt, right? But at that point, and Cortney and I have agreed on this, Kell was already damaged goods because of the Triple G fight. You go up to 160 to fight a monster like that, you get hurt, and then you jump down to 147 to go fight another monster, right? So, Spence made a statement. He's here to stay. He's still young. He's future to boxing. And I'm excited to watch him again come back in the ring. Not as excited to watch Danny Garcia because I thought it was a very poor performance on Danny's part. And I think he lost some fans because of that fight, to be honest with you.
You say it was a cleanup fight. In my view, it's more like an evaluation fight, if I were to make it more specific. But good points.
Tune-up fight, right? It was too easy for Spence. It really was. Nobody here thought it would be that easy. It was too easy. I gave Danny maybe 3 rounds in that fight. That was it. I mean, that was like sparring for Spence. It was too easy.
Mic check. Tiffanie?
I'm here.
Welcome, Tiffanie. Let's get your thoughts on the fight. I remember you on a few episodes talking about this fight, and you shared some concerns about Errol Spence, especially with full sparring with opponents in his training. Give us your assessment, and how did you feel with this performance?
I was impressed by Errol Spence, and I'll be honest with you. I'm one of those. I used to be a journalist, and they tell you not to be biased. You know what I mean? And I'm kind of biased anyway. Like we had your favorite fighter, and I was never really a fan of Errol Spence. Never. The Charlos either, for that matter. But I was never really a fan of Errol Spence. But I have to give the guy props. To be honest with you, I didn't know what was going to happen. I had concerns about not having the sparring partners. We didn't get to see if he was well or not. And I'm like, when they announced the Danny Garcia fight, I'm like, holy shit, that's taking a lot of balls to come back to somebody like that. Because Danny Garcia has a really great resume, to be honest with you. He beat a lot of people, but it was at the lower divisions. And so I was, kind of gunning for, when people ask me, who do you pick? I was going for the underdog Danny, only because I didn't know what Errol Spence was going to do. And also Danny's resume was really, really great and solid. He's a hard hitter, and he can catch Errol Spence. Errol Spence was getting caught by Sean Porter. He was getting hit with some good shots. And I'm like, if Danny catches him, he might get slept. We don't know what's going to happen with Errol Spence. But me being a Terrence Crawford fan, I really needed Errol Spence to do what he did. I needed him to come in, win, and win impressively. And that's exactly what he did. I don't give Danny Garcia no props. I don't know what he was doing in there. That was bullshit. I just don't understand what happened. Like, they didn't have no plan. It was like, we're going to do this, and then nothing happened. It's like, even his father was yelling at him, and Danny was just in, like, the Matrix or something. I have no idea what was going on with Danny Garcia. That was very upsetting. I didn't expect him to do that. But every time he gets up with the top guys at 147, he's kind of like in a limbo. So the only thing I don't know, as far as Danny Garcia, I'd like to see him fight Virgil Ortiz. Other than that, I don't really care to see him fight anybody else. He's kind of in that area with Adrian Broner. And I'm sorry to say, I love Adrian Broner. He's from my city, but he's in that group of people. But Errol Spence was dynamic. I got to get a guy props. I can't hate on that fight at all.
Great points, Tiffanie. And Danny Garcia, for the most part, he never had the right positioning to get his way throughout the fight. Whenever he did land, it was always at an awkward position. He had to loop his shots just to get around Errol Spence's guard. Let me go to you, Cortney. Let me go to you, Cortney. As I remember from the last episode, when you were talking about this fight, you gave Danny Garcia, correct me if I'm wrong, a good possibility of beating him, but you were still leaning towards Spence, and also you did note that Spence was he still had to make improvements in his defensive game. Given all that, and from what you saw from that fight, any thoughts have your thoughts progressed from that last episode after seeing that fight, and also your assessment of the fight itself?
I mean, as far as the fight itself, I just caught the fight. I caught a bootleg version on YouTube. I want to say a big fuck you to Cox Cable. Completely screwed up his birthday. Could not get the fight. I had to order the fight like 3 times, and still it never came up. So I got qualms about that. But I have seen the fight, did my homework for this episode, and so I mean, I'll say this: the thing, Spence showed us how special of a fighter he was with this performance. I didn't think it could get any more dominating for him. I didn't think he could get in there and look as dominant as he did in another fight post Mikey Garcia. And we all knew what it was with Mikey Garcia. Him essentially coming up 2 weight divisions. He'd had a couple fights before at 140, but essentially he was a 135 fighter going up to welterweight to face probably the biggest and baddest welterweight at the time. And Spence made him look completely pedestrian. And I didn't think we would see another performance like that out of Spence, or one against an established guy at 147, former world champion at 147. And he did the business against Danny Garcia in pretty much the same way, on the same keel he did against Mikey Garcia. Completely dominant performance. For me, it was just mind-boggling. I kind of had real-time updates, like from when the accident happened, from when they brought him into the ER, because I know one of the nurses who was attending that night when they brought him in, and he texted me and said, "Dude," he knows I'm a big boxing fan. He said, "Dude, Errol Spence, this dude is not gonna fight again. Like, he is completely just banged up." And he basically said, from what he looked like when they wheeled him into the emergency room to what we normally see him look like, he looked damn near unrecognizable. So that was my main thing, why I was kind of on some wait and see with Errol Spence, just because of, hearing almost in real time like how bad the accident was and how much damage he sustained from that automobile accident. Like Mike was saying, just the video. I think we've all seen the video. He's literally thrown from the vehicle. It's not one of those things where the vehicle hits something and he's thrown from it because he's not wearing a seatbelt. Wasn't wearing a seatbelt, was driving inebriated, car flipped. He flips out of it as the car flips. Like it's how he went from that to what we saw last Saturday is, in my view, it's mind-boggling. And that puts the writing on the wall that Errol Spence is a generational talent, and he's obviously a special fighter, future Hall of Famer. We are going to be talking about Errol Spence for years and years to come. It's not just because of what he had to overcome with the automobile accident, but just because how he's getting in there and he's looking in the ring. It's like I said about Lomachenko. We hate him or love him when we watch him. We have to marvel at him because of the skill set he presents. And that's the same thing with Errol Spence. It's when you see him, you are watching something special. You are watching someone who is generational, who only comes around, maybe at certain times. in certain eras and certain lifetimes of people who watch the sport. So it's crazy. I think he's blessed to have this second chance at life coming back from this accident, to have survived that. And then it's another thing on top of that, to where he's blessed us that we get to see what he's doing in the ring, having overcome that. But I mean, aside from all that, let's put the accident aside. Let's put Danny Garcia as kind of a one-dimensional guy aside. That was an A+ performance.
Yeah.
I don't think it could have gotten any better. Yeah, Danny Garcia might have won a round or two if you were being generous, or if you were really scrutinizing it. And I think that comes from what we were talking about in Lomachenko versus Teofimo Lopez, where Lomachenko just had some rounds where he looked better than he had, and so that prompted you to give him those rounds or whatever. I think that might have been the case with Danny Garcia against Errol Spence, is that you might have given him a few rounds, a round or two, where you might have to go back and watch it and be like, he didn't win that round, but because he did so much better than he was doing in the other rounds, you might be prompted to go ahead and give him and score those rounds for him. But I mean, if you put the accident aside, you put Danny Garcia, and the thing is I think we have to ask is, was Danny Garcia really was he really that one-dimensional, or did Errol Spence, just him being as talented as he is, was he just able to just go in there and put him in that box, put him in that confined space? And I'm leaning towards the latter in that. So I don't think Danny Garcia is that bad of a fighter. I don't think he's a bad fighter at all. I think it was just a situation where Errol Spence is really, really that good. And with Errol Spence, I'm not an Errol Spence fan. And it's not anything. It's not that I dislike him personally. I think he's a very likable person, as far as his persona, as far as his personality. I have no qualms with this style of boxing. With me, Danny Garcia, I just find his fanboys really annoying. I find his fan base to be really annoying. They've kind of put him on that pedestal where they have that God complex of him. But after seeing what we saw on Saturday, it kind of justifies it. It kind of justifies the really annoying, overwhelming fandom that we see from Spence's fan base. Because I mean, he's got the goods, he's got the skills to pay the bills, and I'm just at this point, I'm just really looking forward to seeing what else is next for Errol Spence, because he's purely represented himself and shown that he is value for money, and he's a pay-per-view talent, a pay-per-view fighter, and one of the best pound for pound.
And before I take it to Tommy, and to add to your point, Cortney, as you said, bring those two things aside. As for Danny Garcia, he's lost people, but I haven't seen him that confused against in a while in his whole career until he went up against Spence. So that just speaks to Spence's talent alone and the contrast between those two fighters. So great points, Cortney. Now, going to Tommy, you had a unique perspective on the fight. Literally, you were at the fight. Give us your assessment of the fight, and also give us the atmosphere of being in a live action fight in this pandemic crisis that we're facing, with all the social distancing going on and whatnot.
Yeah. So, just kind of talking about, being there, during this pandemic, there were a lot of social distancing things going on, as far as, the seating. They had everything spaced out to where there was kind of like zigzags of the seats in the different rows. They had 1-inch zip ties around 3 or 4 seats in a row to kind of section them all off. We were on level 1, and even the floor seats, they were in kind of like pod sections. Like you might have 4 seats together, 6 seats together, and they were all spaced out. Other than that, I mean, the areas, the restrooms, things like that, they had a lot of things where they had stuff closed off. They had some of the concession stand areas closed off. So they tried to keep it, as social distance as possible. But, there were still, a lot of areas where, people could intermingle and be pretty close to one another. But the atmosphere was still very solid, being that it was AT&T Stadium. You can easily fit like 100,000 in that stadium. So even with that social distancing, it made it a prime area to be able to, still sell a lot of seats and a lot of tickets and make a lot of gate money on that one. So it was pretty packed. I mean, to be honest, with the distancing, it was pretty packed. So there were a lot of people there, tons and tons, obviously, with Errol Spence being from here in DeSoto and Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. It was massive Spence mania in there. So it was enjoyable. When Danny came out, they were booing him. I don't know if you could actually hear that, but they were booing him pretty hard. But in terms of the fight itself, I was thoroughly impressed with what Spence did, how he looked. We've seen him fight a couple of different ways, and he said it himself that he's kind of fought these different ways on purpose. When he fought Mikey Garcia, he was more of a boxer, and he did that on purpose. He didn't go in there to go knock him out. When he fought Sean Porter, he fought a rough and rugged fight. A lot of people give him, take some credit from him in that fight and say it was like a really tough fight, but he went in there to show a tough fight. So, the different facets that he's shown us, he what's up, Mike? We're gonna see what that was. But hey, he still did his business in that fight. In this fight, he came in, and to start the fight off, I was on pins and needles because I really wanted to see what he was going to look like if Danny Garcia was able to hit him a couple of solid times in the head. There was a lot of body work that was going on between the both of them, but Spence's game plan, he completely neutralized that. Like, he came out pawn with that jab. He was bouncing on his toes. He kept that distance, and he made sure that he didn't get hit in the head too many times. And he kept that jab popping. It was super sharp. He walked him down after a while. He got pretty comfortable. I can't remember what round that was. It was maybe like round 4 or so. He did catch a pretty decent shot to the chin, and you see him kind of hitting his chin and talking like his chin is being tested to show the fans. But I think it was a masterful game plan for somebody like Danny Garcia, because just like you guys said, he was very confused by the type of fight that Spence brought to him. And I think that this was tailor-made for his comeback. Because this new style, I love it. I love it more than that just trying to be super aggressive, walk you down. He was more of a aggressive boxer, and it was great. And Danny had no words for it at all. So I'm super impressed, super glad to see that he was back. I'm honestly glad that all of our doubts were wrong. I think that the only thing that, like I said, I wanted to see was if he was going to get hit in the head. So I think that that's more on Danny and his game plan, because he didn't come out aggressive enough to really take it to him. And even if that is something that was concerning for Spence, something that was concerning for his camp or for us as fans and pundits, it's neither here nor there now. He's gotten out of that fight. We probably won't see him fight again till spring, summertime. That's done. So it's going to be really back to business, back to big fights, and dominant form. So it's good. It was a great show.
Michael, did you want to respond to what Tommy was saying?
I agree with majority of what Tommy said, except for the fact that I think in the Sean Porter fight, I don't think Spence came in there ready to fight the same style. I think that he was more ready for Sean Porter tactics, but I think he had no other option but to fight a nitty-gritty type fight like he did, or because if he was prepared for it, it wouldn't have been as close of a fight as it was. That was the closest fight he's ever had, right? Again, I have to reiterate the fact that I think that more than likely, if there wasn't a knockdown in round 11, that fight probably would be called a draw. You know, some people even had Sean Porter winning the fight. I did not. I thought that was a draw. I thought it was very close. Again, if Sean Porter does not get knocked down round 11, you know, future would have been a little bit different. You know, it might not have been a match with Danny. It would have been a rematch with Sean Porter moving forward. So that's it. Other than that, I think Tommy has great points. I mean, look, he is a multifaceted type of fighter. He has shown everybody that he could box. He could walk you down, and he could do a lot of things in the ring. He's a once in a generation type fight, like Bud Crawford, like Lomachenko, obviously like Canelo. He is that type of fighter for sure. You know, and perhaps maybe Danny was tailor made. I think Danny is at the point in his career where maybe getting rid of his father as a trainer would probably be something very good for him at 32 years old. You know, let's face it. The road is an uphill battle right now for Danny Garcia. It's he's got maybe 4 good years left in boxing, if that. And there's not. I mean, I just like Tiff said, like there's no, I don't have the urge of watching him in the ring. You know, he's not a pay-per-view star. So what's left for him? You know, he is kind of going into that Adrian Broner territory, as she mentioned. So, you know, I'm more interested. We know what Errol Spence is bringing to the ring. We understand that. We know the future of Spence. We know that there's a couple of great fights looming for him, you know, with the goal of Bud Crawford. I think that's the big money fight for him, you know. But I think for Danny Garcia, it's like, what's next for you? Like, where do you go? Like, you're going, like, his career right now is set to go down. You know, there's not a lot of interest. Really isn't. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I'd watch a fight against Virgil Ortiz. Yeah, because it's, we're boxing fans. We're gonna watch it. But other than that, who can he fight? And somebody mentioned Kell Brook. I'd probably watch that fight. Get Kell Brook versus Danny. But Danny is 1 more loss to 2 more losses from going from a significant fighter, which he was when he fought Keith Thurman, to becoming very insignificant in the division, not even being discussed as the top 5 in that division. Whereas probably about 2 years ago, he was in the top 3. Some would say he was in the top 3. So I don't know.
Cortney, did you want to add?
What y'all think about Danny Garcia versus Mikey Garcia? I mean, hey, and okay, so Mikey Garcia versus Danny Garcia, that's one that's been talked about for a while. I mean, I find that matchup intriguing. I mean, Virgil Ortiz, yeah, I would watch that too. I think that would be, at this point, I think that would be more like Danny Garcia getting fed to Virgil Ortiz, perhaps, or at a minimum, as a test fight or a test run for Virgil Ortiz, for us to see how real Virgil Ortiz really is. Pretty much, I don't really need convincing at this point as to what Virgil Ortiz's bona fides are. So I'm thinking more upon on the ilk of Danny Garcia would be getting fed to Virgil Ortiz. But also, from when Danny Garcia first came on the scene, and especially when he moved to 147, I always had this sneaky inclination that Danny Garcia was always being groomed with the intention of being fed to either Floyd Mayweather, and then when Pacquiao came over to the PBC side, perhaps Pacquiao. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised to see him, to see if he fought Virgil Ortiz, but I think the DAZN PBC thing is kind of tricky to work out, since I really don't think we'll see that fight, though it's possible, because the networks are doing more and more business together, and they're going to have to do more and more business together to basically give the boxing public significant fights as we taper, as we kind of get to the other side of this pandemic. But we look at Manny Pacquiao, and Manny Pacquiao at this point in his career, he can fight a circus elephant, and people are gonna tune in, people are gonna watch, and people are gonna awe. He's gonna get his credit for fight. He's gonna get credit for fighting anybody at this point. So I think that is I think that's a value. I think that's a significant fight that can be made. at some point, especially seeing that Manny Pacquiao was kind of just trying to get money before he kind of rides off into the sunset. And Manny Pacquiao has fought so many Hall of Famers that he can get away with it. So I think that is an option to where, we might see a Danny Garcia in with a Manny Pacquiao, especially if Manny Pacquiao fights a super fight against Errol Spence or Bud Crawford and loses either of those fights, but wants to go out on a win. I can see that being viable. And also with Floyd Mayweather trying to come back every 5 minutes or every time there's somebody else on pay-per-view. I think if Floyd wanted to come back because he's lacking for attention and fight somebody who is not a sideshow like a Jake Paul or like a Conor McGregor or whatever, I think Floyd can come back and start looking at the PBC side and looking at the lower rungs or the lower tier of the 147 division. And if he were to do that,
give us a name.
Danny Garcia would be there with open arms. And you know what? Floyd Mayweather had so many diehards, and I'm a diehard. I think anybody who knows me knows I love Floyd Mayweather like I love my mama. But for me, Floyd Mayweather is not a venerable character figure where he can do no wrong or whatever. I don't have the same reverence for Floyd as I do the Pope or whatnot. But there are some people who do. And those people would tune in and they would buy a Floyd versus Danny Garcia fight and they would justify it and sleep well at night doing so, and saying that, well, Danny Garcia is a serviceable 147 person. And on Floyd's end, he might look to that as an option and saying this guy is serviceable. You can't say I'm fighting a non-boxer or a YouTuber or whatever. I'm fighting a legitimate 147 fighter. So, I mean, as far as Danny's future, are all those things I proposed pretty far-fetched? Yes, but a year ago, Mike Tyson and Roy Jones fighting each other was far-fetched too, and we saw that shit. So, I say all that to say, I don't think we've seen the last of Danny Garcia in a big fight, and likely we haven't seen the last of him on pay-per-view. I think he gets one or two more, especially if he can get some wins in the interim. So, as far as the boxing landscape right now and what we're seeing become viable as far as what's being sold to the public, I'm not counting it out.
Good points, Cortney. Now, I can't end a Spence segment without mentioning Crawford. So, Spence, for his last two fights, he's been fighting he fought two different styles of fighters. As with Sean Porter, he faces aggressiveness, come forward style, smaller fighter. He had to deal with this pressure. He had to dig deep to etch out that win against Sean Porter. And now, skip over the car accident, he looked very comfortable against Danny Garcia. He was able to fight him off range. Now, after those two fights, I think he's as prepared as he's ever going to be against hopefully Terrence Crawford. But how hopeful are any of you of that fight ever happening in the near future? Because in my view, time is running out. You got these upcoming stars in the welterweight division like Boots, Jaron Ennis coming up. You got Virgil Ortiz coming up. You're going to want next. It's bubbling on the surface on the lower tiers of the welterweight division. So I think it's imminent, more so now than ever for Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence to get together to get this fight done. So. What are your thoughts, guys, on the possibility of that fight happening really, really soon? Tiffanie, let me go to you.
Well, I'm not real hopeful.
Yeah.
I feel like Terrence Crawford is probably gonna have to buy out his contract or something to get out of in order to get that fight. But the welterweight division, I think it's really important that they get this fight made. The welterweight division has been like the division with all the eyeballs on it for like how many years? Maybe a decade. maybe more. We got some heavy hitters at 135, man. That 135 division is get ready to take over. So I think that they need to make this fight happen. And it's just like, who's holding it up? You know, like, we're seeing what Errol Spence can do. Let's get these guys together in the summer, make it happen. No excuses. I don't want to see. I think Sean Porter said he was the mandatory for Crawford, and maybe Spence is thinking about fighting Pacquiao. I say forget all of that and make the Bud Crawford and Errol Spence fight happen like right away. That's what we all want to see. No, I mean, obviously the Porter fight against Bud will be a great fight, but that's not the fight. No, everybody wants to see Spence versus Bud, and they need to make it happen for the sake of boxing, so we can stop having sideshow Bobs come on, like, you know, Floyd Mayweather doing all. I mean, it's just ridiculous. People are losing faith in boxing, so we need to make that fight happen. That would be like one of the biggest events that we've had in a long time. Definitely
can agree with that. And yeah, I'm not really a fan of those sideshow Bobs that you use, as you label them, with the Jake Pauls and the Nate Robinson. You know, shout out to Nate Robinson. Hopefully he's doing well. Anyone else want to add to anything that Tiffanie said in regards to Spence versus Crawford?
I'll go in real quick.
Go ahead.
So now that Manny's obviously on the other side, you know, I mean, they really have to think about what's going to make most sense. I mean, people forget that this is also a business, so it probably makes a lot of sense for, you know, to make a Spence versus Manny fight from a financial standpoint. Manny wants to fight one more time. He claims that he wants to fight more than once, but you know, Manny's already over 40 years old. I mean, there's and look, Manny can fill up an arena, you know, with 1 day advance notice. We know that, but financially, it makes more sense for Spence to fight Manny and then fight Bud afterwards. So I don't think that fight happens anytime soon. I think Tiff is actually right. He might have to buy his contract out, but I don't know if Spence is all that eager also to fight Bud Crawford. You know, Bud Crawford is already in this, if I'm not mistaken, it's 32, 33 already. They might want to wait another 2 years to fight to get Spence in a ring with Bud. Like that, anybody in his camp knows that that's a realistic loss for Spence. Like Bud Crawford could beat Spence. You know, as I have it right now, I have it 60-40. Like, I've never seen a fighter with Bud Crawford's tenacity in the ring. Like, that guy's a killer in the ring. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's got Mike Tyson DNA in him when he's in the ring. Like, he's there to hurt you. Like, and if you're everybody around Spence, maybe the Manny Pacquiao fight makes more sense, because that's a fight that I think Spence could win. Not easily, but he could win. Now, if Manny pulls a victory, then that's a problem for Spence. Now you know that the Bud fight is not going to be on the table if that happens. Right? They'll make up every excuse where there isn't going to be any anticipation for that fight to occur. So, I mean, they have some big decisions to make in the next 6 months to 9 months, because he just fought Danny Garcia. So there should not be a reason why Spence is going to fight some B or C class fighter. Like, we only expect big names moving forward for Spence. So, I mean, should be Bud, should be Manny. It's got to be one of the two in the next year to two, right? There should be no reason why, or maybe Keith Thurman. But anybody seen Keith? You know, I love Keith. He's one of my favorite fighters. Like, but he's not around. You understand? Like, he's not around. Like, it just seems like since Keith got married, you know, he went on that hiatus, that he's not interested in boxing, like, legitimately, which is a shame, because I still think, and I had Manny, I picked Manny to beat that, you know, to win that fight. But I think if Thurman had gotten a tune-up fight, if you guys saw what I was seeing, he was hurting Manny towards the end. I think Keith wins that fight. And Manny's on record saying that Keith is one of the hardest hitting boxers that he's ever faced, if not the hardest hitting one. Like, Manny got hurt in that fight. Like, he actually got hurt. You know, Manny was not interested in coming back into the ring soon because of Keith Thurman. So I think Keith did himself a disservice by that, or else we would have, if Keith doesn't go on that, and I know I'm off track, but if Thurman doesn't go on that hiatus, we wouldn't be just talking about Bud Crawford and Errol Spence. We'd be talking about Bud, Keith. Like, imagine that we have now 3 names that we'd be discussing right? Keith could have been there, and he did himself a disservice, obviously doing what he did. But that's his personal preference. We can't tell people how to live their life. That's what he wanted, and that's what he chose. But that's my take on it. It might take a while if we even see a Bud Crawford fight. Who knows? It'd be a shame. And Tip is right. If we don't see that fight, let's go to 135 because I'm loving what I'm seeing over there. It's crazy.
Listen. If I had pulled one as bad as Keith Thurman pulled, I'd be like, fuck boxing too, man. I'm trying to lay up. And I think I think that's a classic example of what we're seeing with Keith Thurman is that there's a lot of people who said a happy fighter is a dangerous one, but a happy fighter is also a complacent one. And I mean, you look at him and he stepped into the gym at a very early age. Had a lot of hardship in his childhood, where he basically had to step away from his childhood to focus on boxing. I think Keith Thurman even said he dropped out of high school. I mean, he dropped out of school in like the 8th grade, and pretty much became self-taught about everything else while he was focusing on boxing. So, I mean, when you go through it like that, and then when you find happiness, and you find happiness with since someone saying on the level that he has, I think with him the boxing is not the focus, and I hold criticism as a boxing fan and as a Keith Thurman fan in that I was hoping we would see we would continue to see legendary and great things from one time, but I think his life has gone in a different direction, and what he wants and he's expected of life has also taken a turn. So I mean it's just one of those things. If Keith Thurman is happy, hey, congrats for him. But I think the boxing public and his fans would be happier if he found a balance between the two. Back on the potential between Spence and Crawford. I'm of the opinion I want to see Spence fight Manny Pacquiao next. I'm with Michael. Because this is the thing people forget. Manny Pacquiao, and because most champions are sitting on their belts as of right now. And the organizations are not really pressing for mandatories because it's hard to actually put on fights because there's a pandemic on. And especially with Manny Pacquiao being a senator in a country that's in an area where there are a lot of COVID cases, and not being able to travel for training camp and things like that, and to promote a fight and sit for press conferences and stuff like that. Even though I know a lot of that can be done virtually. It's just one of those things where we easily forget that Manny Pacquiao holds one of the pieces in the cog at 147. And I think I think since Manny Pacquiao is on that side, and he has a belt, let's go with the fight that's easier to make at this point. Let's get and we'd be lying to ourselves if we were to sit here and say that Spence versus Manny Pacquiao is not a mega fight. Come on now. That's that is a legendary, that's a torch passing fight, that's a torch passing opportunity, much like the fight was between Manny Pacquiao and Oscar De La Hoya. That was that was huge. That did numbers. I don't think it would be as big as that, but I mean it's on that same trajectory. So let's go ahead and unify Errol Spence's IBF and WBC title with Manny Pacquiao's WBA title. Let's let Crawford fight Porter because that's his mandatory. Let's wet Terrence Crawford's whistle on the PBC side of things, and those two. And that's not a fight that people would necessarily be adverse to tuning into to see Crawford versus Porter, especially with Porter's style. Let's take care of business on those points because that is Crawford's mandatory, and that is an opportunity to have a mega fight with Spence and Pacquiao. Let's take care of business on those ends. That way, I think if Crawford comes out on top against Porter, if Spence comes out on top against Pacquiao, then there becomes a scenario where there are no more excuses to why this fight cannot happen. And let's, because it's one of those situations where there is potential for all 4 belts to be unified, one champion, one face, one name.
And boxing still wins, by the way. God forbid Spence loses against Manny. and we watch I'll tell you right now, I'll pay $80 to watch Crawford versus Sean Porter. That's a great fight in my opinion, right? Because you have two fighters, that can be rugged in the ring, because Bud could be rugged as well. That could be rugged in the ring, that can put on a performance, and that'll be a great fight. I actually see somebody get knocked down on that fight, like not getting knocked out, because it'll be a brutal, fight, a huge fight in the inside. So I could see Sean Porter get knocked out in that fight. So that'd be great. But let's play out the scenario. Spence loses against Manny. Bud beats Crawford. Bud beats Porter. Who we would be lying if we're not paying to watch Manny Pacquiao versus Bud Crawford. That's a big fight in itself. So PBC still wins. Al Heyman still wins no matter what, because he has a huge fight there looming against Bob Arum. So that'll be a great fight to watch. And boxing fans, I think, still win. I think I'm with Tiff. I'd rather watch Bud versus Spence, but I'm not complaining if I get to see Spence versus Manny and then Manny versus Bud Crawford. And obviously before that, Crawford versus Porter. Like, the boxing world wins with all four fights.
And they can run it back. Who doesn't love a trilogy? Who doesn't love a rematch? Who doesn't love a grudge match? Come on. We're boxing fans. We're suckers for that. Hey, take my money. So that's who we are. That's what we do. That's what we love. So yeah, exactly. Co-signing all the way with Michael.
Yeah, but if I'm Spence, I want Manny Pacquiao, because that's the payday. Now I'm getting paid. And I'm not saying he's not getting paid against Bud Crawford, but he still has another opportunity to get paid again, right, with a Bud Crawford fight. So if I'm him, I'm saying I get Manny first. I'm going to get a huge paycheck there, and then I fight Bud. And if he wanted to, he could retire from boxing before the age of 30, and he's good. Money-wise, financially, he's good. Those two fights already there, he's got a lot of money to make.
And even with that, man, like that settles all of this back and forth that has them at a stalemate right now, because they're both talking 60-40. You got Bud talking legacy and what he's done in other divisions. You got Spence talking, he's the big side, the A side. He's the pay-per-view king right now. So if I see it going that way as well, even though I would like to see Manny and Bud. I've been calling for that one for quite a few years now, so I would love it. But it absolutely makes more sense to see Manny and Spence, and give either way it goes, like Mike said, if Pacquiao does win, I think if Pacquiao does win, kind of to what Cortney mentioned, I think that there would be some sort of a rematch clause in there to where we would get to see that fight run back. But if Spence wins, he's got the 3 belts, and there's nothing that that Bud can say at that point. You can't talk 60-40 when this man has 3 belts. He would be on his 4th straight blockbuster pay-per-view. No, that it settles it at that point. And as soon as I saw the Crawford fight, I think I made a post about it and said if we don't see Spence and Crawford by the later end of next year, I don't think the fight happens. So I do think that there will be a fight between Spence and Pacquiao early, right around that first wave of the big pay-per-view, kind of around that Cinco de Mayo timeframe, where we usually have a very big pay-per-view. And then, we have that second wave in the later portion of the year. And I think that would be the time to make it, to where it's, September, October. If it's October, it gives about a good 5 months or so to put that together. So I would love to see that happen. And I mean, if we got that, 2021 would be an amazing year if we saw all of those fights for boxing.
Hey, I want to raise a point though, and it's not necessarily to disagree with Tommy, but I want to raise a point because we've seen this before in boxing, and especially with big fights and 2 dudes who are circling each other in a fight that we all want to see. I think if Errol Spence comes to that situation where the fight is going to get made with him and Crawford, or it's supposed to get made with him and Crawford, and he's coming through with 3 belts and Crawford has that one outstanding, I think we can see the demand go from 60-40 to like 50, say 55-45. You know what I'm saying? I really wouldn't be surprised if Crawford upped his demand and it's like, yo, I want, or maybe even 50-50, because Crawford is coming into those negotiations saying, if you want to do what I did at 140, or would you want to do what I have already done in my career, you have to come through me. So break me off my half, or break me off 55-45. You know what I'm saying? I think where it's just solid, where we're contemplating, or we're thinking, Crawford is going to be good with 60-40. I don't know about that. And especially with Crawford's mentality too. You know what I'm saying? Crawford is a dude who likes his money. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of people who are detractors of Crawford talk about his competition at 147, of being on the top ranked side and whatnot. But if you look at the financials, this dude who is fighting these guys who everybody dismisses or whatever, he's getting $3 million a pop every time he gets in that ring. He got the same deal that Lomachenko got. You know what I'm saying? And he has been on pay-per-view as well. Did it sell? Not really. But you know what I'm saying? So I think, so do I think Crawford would be justified in saying I want 40, I want a 45-55 or 50-50 split? No, not necessarily, especially if Errol Spence is coming in with 3 belts opposed to his 1. But I really think that could be a viable scenario where we see Crawford saying, like, if it's got to come through me. So I want just as much money for my risk reward factor.
I could definitely see that. I mean, but he's talking 60 right now, and that's the thing. They both talking 60. So I could absolutely see, you come with that third belt, then he's got to step down off of that. At some point he's got to come down. But I could definitely see that pushing for about a 45 at that level with the 3 belts, in his way.
I think Bud lost a little bit of leverage once Manny left and went to the other side. Because now Spence can say, "Fuck you! I get paid I get paid if I fight Manny." So you're 30-something years old. You want to keep on hanging on? All right, I'll fight you when you turn 35, 36. People forget that Crawford is in his already early 30s. Spence is not significantly younger, but I think there's like a 5-year difference. That plays a major part in boxing. And is Bud going to keep on competing at this level in the next couple of years? Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he could turn into like Manny Pacquiao. Who knows? Manny's like 40-something. So
we see no indication of Crawford slowing down.
Yeah, definitely not. But things happen, right? 2 years, 3 years down the road, Bud is active. God forbid he gets hurt.
Errol Spence was never supposed to be the same again after this accident. So as far as age, as far as physical condition, especially this era where we're looking at sports science, nutrition, those things like that, that's really a hard assertion to make. But I mean, I do see what you're saying. I really don't think that's going to be a scenario where Crawford slows down significantly on, on a 2 to 3, year range. I think what we're seeing in Crawford, I think he's gonna be good to go up into his late 30s, and I think it might even be fair to say he's just entered his peak. You know what I'm saying? So like, or maybe his peak is at 34, 35. So I mean, it's really hard to tell on that. Is Spence, as far as him waiting for Crawford to age out, I don't think he's got too many directions he can go while he's waiting. We damn sure know Crawford doesn't. So I think these two are on a very inevitable crash course with each other, especially with Crawford really having nobody left to fight at, to fight at top rank. His mandatory is from the PBC side, so that fight presumably is going to have to go to a purse bid. So it's going to be one of those things where there's going to have to be cross-pollination just in order to get Crawford back in the ring with somebody and to fight his mandatory, to fight the fight that he's supposed to fight. So, I mean, as far as the assertion that Errol Spence could possibly sit on it or wait for him to age out or whatever, I don't think we've got 2 to 3 years to wait for this fight. Something is going to give. or somebody is going to pull a Riddick Bowe and throw a belt in the garbage, or somebody's going to jump up to 154. All those things were. But if these two dudes continue to stay at 147, there is something that's got to break. And probably what breaks is somebody's going to break at the negotiation table at what percentage of the purse they're gonna sit on or come off of.
Yeah, the thing is, I was just gonna say Spence has options. Like he can go fight Crawford, a rematch. I'm sorry, Sean Porter rematch. Right, he can pull that off right now during COVID. He can go fight Manny, right? And he can go up with he can move. He can go from 147 to move up to light middleweight if he wants to. If he really wants to like really create leverage, he can do that too. You know, he's a big 147. He can move up.
He's got a very big Charlo waiting for him at 154 though.
Yeah, he beats Charlo.
And it's a Charlo who's, you know, if I'm not mistaken, Jermell is the one who's trained by they share a trainer.
Yes.
So for that fight to happen, I don't think, and Jermell's got 3 of those belts up there. So I mean, and the other guy holding a belt is with Golden Boy. So I mean, as far as saying these guys, I think Crawford has a better chance of going up to 154 before Spence does.
Is Crawford's contract running out next year? The top rank? I think it's 2021,
yeah, his
right?
deal is up next year.
So there you go. Just ride it out.
Great points, everyone. So we'll see what happens as far as Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence. And oddly enough, we got to thank Manny Pacquiao for still keeping his name in the hat for stringing, because without him, who knows what would happen. But at least he's the common denominator, at least keeping the talks between a future fight between Spence and Crawford possible. So going on to the next segment, let's talk about Anthony Joshua's last night's victory over Kubrat Pulev, ninth round knockout on DAZN. But we already know what this is really about. It's really about Anthony Joshua's eventual showdown against Tyson Fury. Hopefully, they're planning to make it early next year. But let's first look at the win last night. It was he was pretty much too much for Pulev. Joshua's offensive arsenal culminating in a series of flash uppercuts in the 9th round before the eventual knockout victory. It was Anthony Joshua's first fight in the COVID-19 pandemic era. And, you know, after the fight, there was a little debate going on between Brian Kenny and Chris Mannix about who's now currently number 1 in the heavyweight division. And Chris Mannix, he was arguing for Anthony Joshua number 1, simply for the fact that his strength of recent opposition has been greater than Tyson Fury. But Brian Kenny, he was arguing for Tyson Fury just for the simple fact that he's reclaimed the heavyweight lineal title twice. First time against Vladimir Klitschko, and now recently Deontay Wilder. So I got a question. I'll start off with you, Tiffanie. Who are you siding with as far as number 1 right now in the heavyweight division between Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury? I'll give you your thoughts on that.
I think I'm rolling with Tyson Fury. I like Anthony Joshua. I liked him before, but you know, when he got knocked out by Andy Ruiz, that kind of put me on alert. Like, oh my God, the action figure got destroyed. You know, so you know, he does all this specialized science stuff and all this stuff, and it's like, damn, they didn't even help you. So I was very excited for him because he's a young dude. You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, he's the future. And I wanted to see him against Deontay Wilder. And Andy Ruiz just totally destroyed that thought process. So I'm going to roll with Tyson Fury. I think he has superb boxing skills. He's a big guy. And I think that he can use that jab against Anthony Joshua. And so I'm going to roll with Tyson Fury.
Great point, Tiffany. I can see that. Tommy, your thoughts on the knockout by Anthony Joshua, and also give your thoughts about that debate they had going on, and you're number one in the heavyweight division in your view?
So in the words of Michael Gomes, I'm gonna say, "There's only one Tyson Fury." Hey, I got to roll with Fury on that one as well. I think that he's the more prominent boxer, fighter. He's more skilled, and I think that a fight between them two, will absolutely be Tyson Fury. Now the fight last night, or the Anthony Joshua fight, he looked good. I mean, he looked good. The one thing I did want to see him do was kind of throw more jab combos than the uppercut combos. He was like seriously layering them uppercuts 2 or 3 at a time over and over. But I mean, he was knocking Pulev all around the ring, man. You saw him turning his back and everything. Like he had nothing for Anthony Joshua. So it was impressive seeing him come back and look that sharp in that fight. It was, like you said, the first fight back in this pandemic time frame. So I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was pretty fun. I even liked seeing him kind of throw a little punch after the bell and get a little nasty. So they was talking big shit. Before the fight, during the fight, they didn't even have ring instructions. Like it was some bad blood going on with that, and he did his business on that one. He showed that bad blood flowed through. So, but yeah, you got to give me Fury as the top heavyweight.
Right on, Tommy. Michael, your thoughts on the victory, and also who would you rank higher right now between Joshua and Fury?
Thoughts on the victory? It was a good victory, is what I expected. I thought he would put Pulev out of there earlier. As far as you guys know, that I'm big on Tyson Fury, but I don't think that's as easy of a fight for Tyson Fury as we think it is. Because the one thing, like, Tyson Fury is not a very heavy-handed boxer, right? I know, yes, he knocked out Deontay out, down, but he's not really a knockout artist. They both are very, very skillful fighters. Anthony Joshua proved himself in his revenge fight that he could fight and that he could readjust, that he could fight from the outside, and he did, and that he could be smart. The thing about Anthony Joshua is that he's an intelligent boxer. He doesn't have he's not crafty the way Tyson Fury is. Nobody is, especially at that size. Like how, you look at Tyson Fury's body and this guy's like 6'7", 6'8", 200 something pounds, and the way he doesn't look like an athlete, but the way he moves, that's just like, it's special, right? It's something completely special. He's not crafty like Tyson Fury, but he's got enough he's got enough power behind his jab to keep Tyson Fury also at bay. And I think that I know that Anthony Joshua, in terms of his technique, I think he's a better boxer than Deontay. This is not an easy fight for Tyson Fury. If I had to bet, I bet Tyson Fury wins that fight, but it goes to 12 rounds, and you might see a split decision. That's what I'm going to say as far as that. Anthony Joshua is not Klitschko. He's not. When we saw a Klitschko fight, Tyson Fury, Klitschko's a very stiff heavyweight. He's not mobile. Anthony Joshua is very, very. He's an athlete. He's, he can bounce around. He moves well in the ring. He's fast. He's quick. He's quick on his feet. His only knock is the fact that he can't really take a punch. We've seen it. It's been multiple fighters, not just Ruiz. He's been hurt by Dillian Whyte. He's been hurt before in the past by other boxers. He's been knocked down by Klitschko. That's his only problem. And the other issue, which I think he just fixed, I don't know if you guys agree with me or not, but I've noticed that he's now thinner. His stamina has been a lot better. Even against Pulev, I think round 4, when he's throwing a bunch of He's throwing a bunch of wild punches in round 4, and I'm like, here we go. He's going to run out of steam. It's going to be another replay of what we saw even against Klitschko. Same thing happened. You know, he's trying to go for the kill, and he couldn't, and he lost stamina, and then he got knocked down after that. I think he's fixed that, which is great, but he hasn't fixed this. You know, but I against Tyson Fury, I don't think that's going to be an issue. You know, that's going to be a problem for him if he ever gets a fight against Deontay. If they ever fight, that's going to be a problem. But against Tyson Fury, he's got a better shot at beating Tyson Fury than he does against Deontay Wilder.
Great thoughts, Michael. Cortney, your thoughts?
All right. First off, Tiffanie, I want to say there was no science going on with AJ in that first fight against Ruiz because he did his training camp in Miami Beach. There was no science. There might have been a few mojitos. There might have been some Cuban cuisine, and I'm not just talking about only the food. You know what I'm saying? So but no, I just had to throw that out there. But no, I mean, with AJ, so first off, I'm gonna give you my assessment of the fight with AJ and Kubrat Pulev. First off, I was worried, like, in the second fight against Ruiz because we saw a really timid, overly methodical Anthony Joshua who was just, like, super cautious and who didn't take the chance. Where he had Ruiz dead to rights at some points, and he just wouldn't pull the trigger on him. And I thought we were seeing the makings of a broken fighter mentally in that rematch with Ruiz. Though, I mean, he won in pretty convincing fashion. I think what we saw against Kubrat Pulev, though, is it was the old Anthony Joshua. It was the old super super aggressive, picking his shots, going in there, trying to get through your guard, trying to get dude out of there. And Pulev, I mean, we all saw him get knocked out pretty viciously a few years back against Vladimir. But for the most part, what we've seen is the dude is super serviceable as a heavyweight. And he fought his way back to this to this position. So what I saw with AJ is it was the old school AJ who is exciting, who is a home fighter, because I think AJ is a fighter who does not travel well. I think we saw that in New York against Ruiz in the first fight. I think we saw that in the rematch with him in Saudi Arabia. I don't think AJ is a fighter who is very comfortable fighting away from that energy that he draws from the big crowds there in the UK. And even though this wasn't a big crowd, so it was still, it was a crowd. It was the first crowd who sat live for a boxing event in the UK. The UK has been ravaged pretty hard by the pandemic, so I think just for him taking that in and taking that notion of, hey, I'm at the forefront. I'm putting it on for UK. I'm the first person back with a live audience on in a big fight on pay-per-view out here in the UK. I think when AJ is in the scenarios where he's a groundbreaker, where he's a trade setter, where he feels like he can put the public in the UK on his back, I think that's where he thrives, and I think that's what we saw yesterday when he fought Kubrat. Now, in relation to who is the better or who is the number one heavyweight between the two, Anthony Joshua or Tyson Fury, we got to go with Tyson Fury. You know what I'm saying? Hate him or love him, the dude can fight his ass off. The dude is an all-terrain vehicle. You know what I'm saying? And he can do it. He can do it over in the UK in a filled-up soccer stadium. He can go over to Germany in mainland Europe and do it in a hostile territory like he did against Vladimir Klitschko. Or he can come to Vegas and light up the neon. Or he can whoop your ass. In your backyard like he did Deontay Wilder, coming out singing "Crazy for You," like that. Me seeing that is. I'm convinced Tyson Fury is a fucking boogeyman on a whole nother level. I have nightmares about that man, whispering, "Crazy for You" in my fucking ear. And even beyond that, even beyond the bravado, even beyond the persona, though, Tyson Fury is he's the lineal. He's the man. Deontay Wilder was the man by virtue of that was a 1-2 fight. He came out on the number one on that end. So now he's established lineage in the welterweight. I mean, in the heavyweight division, he is, saying he's the top dog. No matter how you see that, an argument can be made for Anthony Joshua being number one by virtue of him having more belts, by virtue of him beating a Hall of Famer in Klitschko, and by virtue of the overall resume. But Tyson Fury is he's reestablished the lineage in the heavyweight division. He's undefeated, and he basically beat the dude who was knocking everybody out. He beat the man with the God-gifted right hand, and he beat his ass from pole to post. So, I mean, the argument can be made that AJ is number one. Anybody who presents that argument, I don't think is foolhardy in doing so. But Tyson Fury is that dude right now.
I think
it was the vest.
Yeah, I think we unanimously all agree that Tyson Fury at this point is still the top dog in the heavyweight division. Any last?
Wait, I just want to say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
He's only the top dog because he beat Deontay. From a resume standpoint, AJ's resume, I think people underrate AJ's resume. His resume for the amount of time he's been boxing. Remember, he started boxing late. Number one. Number two, for the amount of time he's been boxing at his age, people forget he's young, right? His resume speaks volumes actually over Tyson Fury's. Resume-wise, like if we're going to talk resume-wise, his resume is far above Tyson Fury. As far as what Tyson Fury accomplished by beating Deontay and the way he beat him, that also speaks volumes. And that's why it's tough to say it's tough to make that argument. You have to kind of be technical with it because it's very difficult to say who's better or who's number one, only for the simple fact that one beat the man, right? That everybody considered the boogeyman, and the other guy has been beating solid fighters for the past 4 or 5 years while making tons of fucking money. And I think people forget the amount of money AJ actually makes. AJ is making same type of money that Canelo is making, right, in the UK, which is insanity. Like even against Pulev, he made it's not official, but rumor has it 13 million pounds. That's a lot of money. Some boxers don't make that kind of money over their career. He's making a lot of money while doing it. So just wanted to point that out. Sorry, Aaron.
No, not at all. But also just to add to that point, just a tidbit about AJ's recent quality of opposition. One can make a point that Tyson Fury could how would he face against those opponents that Joshua has faced? He could have beat them in better fashion, so we never know. So but yeah, I agree. Tyson Fury, he's the number one top dog in the heavyweight division. Going on to the next subject, since Gomes briefly mentioned Canelo, so now we're going to talk about Canelo. He has a fight coming up December 19th against Callum Smith, December 19th in the Alamodome, San Antonio, Texas, where Tommy Rush Jr. resides at, Texas generally. But yeah, both fighters, they'll be competing for the vacant WBC title in that division. Also, Callum Smith will be fighting also for Canelo's WBA counterpart in that division. But going back to the WBC title, it was recently vacated by David Benavidez for missing weight in his recent fight against Alexis Angulo. Just like to note that. But first off, kudos to Canelo Alvarez for making this fight happen, especially in the midst of his transition out of Golden Boy Promotions. Callum Smith, he's ranked number one among active super middleweights across most boxing publications, undefeated with 27 wins, 19 knockouts. In my view, he's not slowing down anytime soon. So from a matchmaking perspective, you have to be excited for this fight. As for my prediction, despite the odds against Canelo, I'm hopeful Canelo will pull out the victory. I think he's at this point adaptable to any style against any fighter presented to him. So It'll be a considerable challenge for Canelo in facing Smith, but I think that he has that pedigree enough to add another victory towards his already impressive pound for pound resume. Let me go to you, Tommy Rush. What are your thoughts about this upcoming fight coming December 19th?
I think I'm excited as hell for it, man. I'm glad that we got it. It's right before my birthday, so I got a great fight to watch. Uh, I also think that this is going to be, somewhat of a challenge for Canelo, but I think Canelo's going to get it, man. I think that the one thing that we've continued to see out of Canelo is that it's almost like he absorbs something from every one of the great fights that we've seen him in. He takes that and he puts it into his game plan, and he implements that into his own arsenal, and he it's like he's damn getting those infinity stones or some shit. Like that dude is serious, and I think that this is going to be another one where he's going to win this fight. He'll find a way to win this fight, difficult or not. He will find a way to adjust in that ring. He'll find a way to land the power shots. He'll figure out how to work his defense and press the issue where he's going to need to. He's going to pull this fight out, but I think that it'll be very enjoyable because Callum Smith is no joke. And he's no pushover, and he won't be a pushover against somebody even like Canelo.
Great points, Tommy. Tiffanie, your thoughts about this upcoming match between Canelo and Callum Smith?
Well, I think it's like I'll agree with Tommy. I think it's going to be a tough fight for Canelo, but I honestly don't see anybody beating Canelo. I don't care what division he's in, man. He continues to crush it. I don't care if he's at 154 or 175, man. He's just crushing all competition. And I've said it over and over. I just don't see anybody beating Canelo Alvarez. And he's been at the top of my pound for pound list since after he lost to Floyd Mayweather. So, like I said, I think it's going to be another victory for Canelo Alvarez. And I don't have any qualms about him losing that fight at all.
Definitely. And it's very apparent. Canelo, he's on a all-time high, and he's riding that momentous wave currently in the midst of his career, especially in a tumultuous point in his career, as we all know that he's a recent free agent. But yeah, Cortney, your thoughts about this upcoming fight?
I think it's one of those things where he whooped Callum Smith's little brother's ass, and I think he's about to whoop Big Brother. I mean, well, actually, it was his older brother. He's smaller physically, but I think he's about to beat up on the younger, bigger brother. I mean, I think there's going to be with what we're seeing in Canelo fights, it's kind of formulaic, and the guys he's fighting is. The guys he's fighting from, we saw last fight Kovalev, we saw when he took on Amir Khan, we saw when he fought Triple G. There's always, with those opponents with Canelo, there's always that intangible where we're intrigued by the matchup because we don't know, with Amir Khan, we didn't know how he was going to deal with the speed of those combinations. With Kovalev, we didn't know how he was going to deal with that power, that height, that reach. With Triple G, we didn't know how he was going to be able to deal with that perpetual movement coming forward and somebody who's going to keep him on his back foot. With Callum Smith, I think the intangible is how he's going to deal with somebody who is presenting those height and reach advantages, and is just so young and so young and strapping and spry at this point. And coming off this long layoff or whatnot. But as like in all those matchups that I mentioned before, we see when Canelo makes when he makes the adjustment, it's pretty much over. With the exception of the two Triple G fights. But with Khan, how he dealt with that speed when he figured it out and he made that adjustment, it was lights out. The fight was over. With Kovalev, when he figured him out and he put him out of there. I think this is going to be I think it's going to be more along those lines of what we saw against Amir Khan and Kovalev rather than what we saw against Triple G, where that was a process over 2 fights where he had to make those adjustments and figure them out. I think I think it's going to be maybe a challenging couple first few rounds, or maybe first half of the fight. But I think formulaically, there's going to be a switch that goes off in Canelo's a light switch that goes off in his head, and when it does, he's going to turn Callum Smith's lights out.
Great points, Cortney. Michael, your thoughts on the upcoming matchup?
Kudos for Canelo for taking that fight, because this guy I don't think Callum is going to be a walk in the park for Canelo at all. I think it goes to the scorecards. I think you might see Canelo have a hard time, because Callum Smith actually keeps distance pretty well. He's got a pretty good jab. He's got a lot of power as well. He's young. He's 30 years old. He's fresh. I was very impressed with the way he beat George Groves in that fight after George had beaten Chris Eubank. George is no pushover either. And Canelo hasn't been in a ring for quite some time either. So I don't know. I mean, I praise him all the time because he pushes the boundaries, and what I think he's doing right now. And as much as we've criticized him in the past for cherry picking, we have to put that to the side now, because he's gone up several divisions and he's done incredible things in multiple divisions. I mean, Canelo could retire today and he's a Hall of Famer, right? First ballot, no questions asked. But at a division that he's not used to, and he's fighting against a guy who's visibly bigger, 6'3", I think, right? Caleb's like tall, big guy. He tends to, and he's also a good pressure fighter. He does come forward in a lot of his fights. I don't know how well Canelo is going to do. I pick him to win, but it's going to be interesting. I think this is going to be his first true test in terms of somebody who's bigger than him. When we watched the first fight against Triple G, we noticed that there was a difference in size between Triple G versus Canelo before Canelo kind of blew up a year and a half, 2 years later. Yes, against Kovalev, he did win the fight. But, I hate to say this, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Kovalev was doing pretty well, but a lot of people know that Kovalev has a lot of legal issues because of his drinking and whatnot. So I watched the replay of that fight, and I hate to say it, but I'm going to have to go with Danny Pena. I think Kovalev took a dive. I really do.
Get the fuck out of here, man.
I really think Kovalev might have taken a dive on that fight. How many times have you seen Kovalev get hit in the chin?
Mute this man.
Yeah, I think he took a dive. I really do. If he got knocked out by a body punch, I would say absolutely. But the way he got knocked down, I don't know. And Kovalev was just like hesitating to use his power. Like when he snapped Canelo with his jab, like Canelo was getting snapped back. Watch the fight again. Like you saw the power. And I'm like, okay, why is he not going back to his jab? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I think Canelo's going to have a hard time with Smith. He'll eventually pull a victory. Plus, even if it's a very close fight, you know how that goes with Canelo's fights anyway, right? We've seen it multiple times. I don't know. I want to watch Canelo come back. I want to watch like Canelo versus like Charlo. Like I don't want to talk about Canelo versus Caleb. Like let's go to like come back. Like I feel like he's over there because he's trying to avoid what's over here. Like as much as he's great, like you know what I mean? Like it's okay. He already took a loss, right? Floyd beat him. It's okay to come like there's great fights for him down the division. They're very good fights. But like potentially he could lose fights. Right? Come down. Let's make these fights happen. But look, he's been daring to be great and he's done a great job at it. Canelo's got the best resume in the entire sport right now in terms of active fighters. Hands down. And he's great. So I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I still think he lost against Triple G in the first fight. So I would have loved for that trilogy to happen, but we all know that's not going to happen. And Triple G now is probably at the point where he's walking around with a cane and a walker.
I mean, then why do you want to see it so bad? Do you realize the hypocrisy in that though? You say you want to see the Triple G fight, but you're already discounting it by putting the goalpost.
I wanted to see the Triple. I wanted to watch. I don't.
I want to see the trilogy.
Too much time
compared to what's going to happen in the trilogy. Come on.
Father Time has caught up to Triple G. It's done.
You got a lot of that Floyd Mayweather haterism in you, man. You got like, is that your new dude to hate on now? Like, come on. What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Canelo?
Wow.
He's not my new dude.
Wow.
I'm the one that's been praising him.
You owe our viewers, you owe our listeners better than what you're presenting right now, man.
No, I've been saying it, but why is he? All I'm saying is there's competition for him. Why are we fighting guys that he should not be fighting?
Who is he cherry picking?
He's not cherry picking.
Come on, man.
He's not cherry picking.
But you said he was. Which is it, Mike? Which is it, Mike?
No, I didn't say that. I said that we used to criticize it. Wait. You're misconstruing what I said. I said that we used to talk about him cherry picking in the past. But since then, he's built up his resume to the point where he can choose and pick whoever he wants to fight. He has nothing to prove anymore. He can literally. How old is Canelo? How old is he? Legitimate question. He's 29.
I'm not sure. I think Canelo's like 27, 28.
Yeah, he can retire. Think about it. He can retire right now. He's the first ballot Hall of Famer right now. He's one of the best that the sport has seen in the course of the last 10 years. He can retire right now. He's gotten to the position in his career that he can cherry pick if he wanted to. But he's not cherry picking with guys at a division that I think he's small.
When has he ever cherry picked?
He's cherry picking in the past.
Who is he cherry picking?
Amir Khan.
And he's 30, by the way.
30, right? It doesn't matter. I mean, he's still young. Amir Khan and multiple boxers prior to that.
Okay, hold on. Hey, that's like okay. Name at least one or two of these multiple fighters you're talking about. That's easy to make a statement.
I'm wrong. Not cherry pick. Let me rephrase that. Not cherry pick. Canelo weight. He stood in a division that he did not belong in, and that's sort of cherry pick. That's like, think about it like this. Let's say, Adrian Broner goes back to 135, which I thought he was excellent at that division. But let's say he can barely make it. He's just there because he knows he's going to beat that. He can beat everybody. He can bully everybody. The next day he's going to weigh 25 pounds more. That's in a way, that's cherry picking. That's what he was doing. Canelo has that. That catch weight shit, that Canelo weight, that's a real thing, and we all know about it. That's a real thing.
All right, Floyd brought people to catch weight.
Say that again?
I said Floyd has brought people to catch weight. Manny Pacquiao has brought people to catch weight. Cotto has brought people to catch weight.
There's a difference.
What's the difference, though?
I'll tell you the difference. The difference between, let's say, Manny doing a catch weight, the difference between... No, I'm not, because he's typically the bigger fighter anyway. For the most part, and when he was in a prior division, he was typically, before he went to middleweight, he was typically the bigger fighter. Always, he was typically the bigger fighter. Even when he fought Miguel Cotto, he was the bigger fighter. Visibly, he was always visibly bigger by like 15, 20 pounds. Literally, rumor has it that he walks around 180, 185 on fight night. When you're fighting at 147 and you're at that kind of weight. That's a lot. That's cherry picking, in my opinion.
Canelo hadn't fought at 147 in like.
He made Kirkland come down. He made Kirkland come down.
What's up?
He made Kirkland come down when Kirkland and him fought. He made Kirkland come down in that fight. You remember? Kirkland was weight drained. It's one of the reasons why Amy Wolf didn't want him to fight. Okay, she didn't want him to take that fight because of it. Because she knew it was going to happen.
If I'm not mistaken, though, Kirkland has been a 154 fighter his whole career, though. So those Canelo weight fights were at 155. So
no, it wasn't just 155. If I'm not wrong, it wasn't just at 155. Don't make me have to put into research.
I could be wrong, but I think you're mistaken. I think you're mistaken because I mean the whole Canelo weight thing became a catch-all because those fights were at 155. So, but the thing is, okay, I'll give you that thing because I'm not a fan of catch weights Canelo fighting all those fights at the Canelo weight, so that I found that a little disconcerting myself. So I'll give you that. We we can agree on that.
Well, we know why, right?
Triple G. But fighting at a catch weight and calling somebody a cherry picker, that is not one and the same. And I would see if he was bringing guys completely out of their division or whatever, but we're talking about fights that are say between 1 and 2 pounds within range of what these guys are already fighting.
What about Josecito Lopez? Wasn't he like a lightweight that jumped up to fight Canelo?
Yeah, that I think Josecito Lopez was competing at 140. He beat, if I'm not mistaken, he beat Victor Ortiz at 147, and then he went to 154. So, but that's a different situation because he wasn't bringing Josecito Lopez. He agreed and he signed to that fight. That's basically somebody who is progressing through weight divisions who they're not ready for. What we saw with Josecito Lopez fighting Canelo was basically the same thing as we saw with Mikey Garcia fighting Errol Spence. And nobody said Errol Spence was cherry picking or or the narrative wasn't, Errol Spence brought this little guy up or whatever. No, the little guy wanted to smoke, so he gave it to him. So, I mean, I just think I think Canelo has become the new Floyd in a lot of aspects. In that a lot of a lot of people, it's like when the crown is on your head, people are looking to shoot it off. And I'm not discounting Mike Gomes' criticisms of Canelo as pure hatred or on the level that people hated on Floyd or whatever. But I mean, the thing is where my frustration comes in the conversation with Canelo is what more does this guy have to do? Like, come on, man. This dude is transcending. He went from fighting at this Canelo weight and taking a lot of heat and a lot of flack for that to where he's gone up to 175. He's fighting at 168. And the thing is where if you look at his stature and the guys he's fighting at 175 and 168 in these weight classes, like he's coming in every time with a significant weight and height disadvantage, and particularly a reach disadvantage in this guys, and he's still getting the job done. So I mean, the thing that gets me frustrated in the conversation with Canelo is what more does this guy have to do? It seems like every time he has a transcendent performance, there's always a caveat that people are rushing to put into it. So,
responding back, that's why I allow him. I won't give him slack anymore because he's doing what he's been doing for the past 3 years. But if he didn't do that, then it would have continued to linger around him. Why we would still continue. Well, he made Amir Khan go up. He fought at catchweight because he didn't want to go to fight. He didn't want to go to middleweight to fight Triple G. Let's just be honest. That's exactly what happened. And he's got some controversial wins, and he's got the Triple G for draw, and that's not on him, obviously, right? It's not on him, right? Because he's not the judge. But we all saw what we saw. Triple G won the first fight, point blank. You don't have to be a boxing pundit to make that assertion. He won the first fight. He has a loss against Triple G, just not on paper. But in what we saw, everybody. There isn't one news outlet out of the 20-something out there that actually claimed that Triple G lost that fight or agreed to the draw. So yes, I mean, I will. That's the only reason why I allow him, because he's already, in the last 3 years, he's changed his narrative going up. We can argue maybe the fight against Trout, that the judges were a little lenient, or was it against Lara, whatever the case may be. We can make some arguments that he should have more than one L on his resume, and that the draw shouldn't be there. That was, very, very kind. That's all I'm saying. He's transcended to something better, because if he didn't, we would still be talking about these controversial things about Canelo. And let's not forget, we all forget about that tainted. We forget about that tainted meat.
Okay, you say we're still talking about these things. It's like the better he does, though, the more people are prompted to talk about those things. And again, the question: what did he do? Who hurt you? What did Canelo do to hurt you? That's what I'm asking everybody, man. What did the redheaded little boy do to hurt you?
He did nothing. I'm just stating the facts. People forget about history in the past, right? It's still there. We could forget about it, but it's still there. It's still there. I don't want to talk about Canelo anymore. Canelo, fight Charlo.
But you want to see the trilogy. But
I don't want to see the trilogy. I said I wanted to. I don't have any interest watching Triple G fight him the third. The Triple G doesn't win. Point blank, I'm telling you, Canelo wins. You might actually see Canelo knock him out. Father time's a real thing.
Great stuff. Great stuff. One quick concluding segment before we end it. There was a lot happening on the Top Rank on ESPN this past Saturday. First, you had Shakur Stevenson handling business against Toka Clary in the unanimous decision. But the bigger headlines in that event were the undercards, were the co-fights. You had Masayoshi Nakatani stopping Felix Verdejo, 9th round knockout after rebounding from a first-round knockdown, who wins the WBO Intercontinental Lightweight title. And also, you got this rising star in the super middleweight division from Brooklyn, New York, Edgar Berlanga, continuing his streak of undefeated streak of 16 wins, 16 knockouts. I know it's a lot of stuff I mentioned, but my only question for each of you is, if you saw the telecast, what was your biggest takeaway or biggest takeaways from that event, Top Rank ESPN, December 12th? Let me go to you, Tommy. What was your biggest favorite moments per se from that event?
So the Nakataki fight, that was probably my favorite out of everything, but the biggest takeaway is 98.8 seconds. That is the average of Berlanga's fights in his career with 16 fights. 98 damn seconds. Like, it's ridiculous how those bad intentions are when he gets in that ring. That dude is phenomenal. Now I do think that, if we were to talk about, him against some higher class elite level opponents, there would be some different things to discuss, when it comes down to the actual boxing portion of it. But from what we see, I mean, that dude is a killer. And, that 98 seconds, like, nobody, I think, what was it? Nobody's ever lasted longer than 2 minutes and 40 seconds or 42 seconds or something like that against this dude. I'm sitting here watching this fight, and he almost made it. And then boom, he was out of there. But that Nakataki fight, man, that fight was very it was very exciting. I was watching that, and he was catching it in the beginning, and I sat there and I'm just looking and I'm watching. I'm like, man, it's something about the Asian fighters like that. They can take some punches. They got some hella chins, man. And he came out and he was ready to brawl to the end, and he ended up winning that fight, man. So that was the most impressive and exciting portion for me. But that 98 seconds, dude, Berlanga is a fucking beast.
Exciting card. Tiffanie, if you saw the telecast, what was your favorite moments from that card that happened last night?
I'll be honest with you. I walked away and missed the Berlanga knockout. So that happened. Nakatani, I watched most of that fight and I seen the knockout, and he was getting hurt in the early rounds by Verdejo. And, and if you listen to the commentators, they were all on, Verdejo. And then, out of nowhere, Nakatani came through and did that. And the guy actually, like, his orbital bone was fractured in his last fight. So, like, to pull that out, that was tremendous. So I got to, give Nakatani some props for that. And that kind of derailed Verdejo's trajectory of where he thought he was going to go. So there's that. But as far as Berlanga, I think he has that 168 division on notice. Like, that's pretty scary to think about. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, this guy's exciting. Everybody wants to watch him. And so the next time I see him fight, I want to make sure that I'm there and don't move, because you never know what's going to happen. Shakur Stevenson, it was like 12:30 here, and I was waiting, and I woke up and it was 7 in the morning, so I missed the whole fight. I had to go back and watch Shakur. I heard he was put on a boxing clinic, but I didn't get to see his fight. So obviously, the other two fights were fantastic.
Yeah, Edgar Berlanga, that was my number one favorite moment from that telecast, and I expect to see more of him on ESPN Top Rank. Cortney, your biggest takeaways from that card that happened last night?
Yo, so the Nakatashi knockout of Verdejo. My first reaction is and I think everybody from the group knew for years. Everybody thought I was unfairly hating on Verdejo because I was saying it from jump. They were building him up as the next Tito, Tito Trinidad, or so the next great Puerto Rican champion, from the island, from the Commonwealth. And I was saying it from jump. It was like, this is not it. He's not that dude. And he had a stumble. It looked like he was on a trajectory. He was coming back, and he might possibly be that dude. But it was, I was still saying it. It was just like he's not. His focus is in commissary with his skill set, with his talent. It's not there. And when the end result, because he knocked him down. He was having his way. He had him almost dead to rights, but he couldn't quite pull that trigger. He couldn't quite finish him. And I was saying, wait for it. And I had actually predicted Verdejo to win too. Because I thought Nakatashi he might have I thought he might have been a little shop worn from that fight against Teofimo Lopez. But then as that fight went on, it reminded me of a fight we saw on the undercard of Canelo Cotto a few years back between the Japanese guy Miura and the Mexican champ Valdez, and it went the other way, where Miura got knocked out, but it was that was that same kind of knockdown, drag out fight where one guy seemed like he was put away, but then he would come back, and it was just going back and forth like that. But like that result in that fight where Verdejo basically got ended, that did not surprise me at all. That was not a surprising result. And if it wasn't that fight, I could have seen it happening in another fight. I just think it was going to be that particular opponent to do that. And even, his reaction after he'd gotten up was kind of like, all right, good fight, man. So, I mean, we see dudes who are knocked off that trajectory, and I think they're contemplating how that loss is going to affect their career and their life and their money and their ability to risk. And, they're distraught. They're despondent after that. But Verdejo was just like, yeah, all right. I'll fight, I'll get another fight, whatever. So, I mean, I think when you see a fighter take an L and the reaction is like that, it harkens back to what Floyd Mayweather said. It's like when you lose, that makes it easier to lose again because it's in your head. It's always, it's always there with you now. It's like, that happened to me once, that can happen to me again. And I think that's where I think that's where we are with Verdejo, is that he's taking an L, and the next, the prospect of him losing again, it's not scary anymore. It's not terrifying. That's not something that he thinks he cannot deal with anymore. So when we're dealing with that in a type of fighter, we see a whole different fighter. We see a whole different mind state. We see a whole different type of attitude coming in, and that affects everything from the preparation to how they take hits to where if they get dropped, their will to get back up again and stuff like that. So that's that I think that's what we saw. As far as Shakur Stevenson in the main event, that was classic Shakur Stevenson. That was expected. That was standard. That's what I'll say. That was a standard Shakur Stevenson performance, and I mean they need to go ahead and get in there with him because he's not playing. And that's probably what I don't want to get in with them, particularly Oscar Valdez. And then as far as Edgar Berlanga, that dude is ready right now. I think he can whoop Callum Smith's ass if Canelo wasn't fighting him. That's how big I am on Edgar Berlanga's talent and his potential and his star power, even at this early point. I think I think rightly so. They're talking about matchmaking. They're talking about development. They're talking about getting more rounds or whatever. But I'm just at the point now where I want to see him get in there with an established 168. Like, let's find him a former 168-pound champion and see, you know what I'm saying, see how he does in there. That's why I miss Edison Miranda, man. Because back in the day, Edison Miranda would have got in there and got gobbled up, but you know what I'm saying, it would have been a question. It was like, how many rounds was Edison Miranda able to extend him or whatnot? So that's why I miss guys like that at between 168 and 175. But hopefully they can find him somebody like that, and we can see, we can pretty much get the confirmation of what we already know, that this kid is for real.
Great stuff, Cortney. And Michael, if you saw that telecast, what was your favorite moments from that televised fight? Yo.
Oh, there you go. I only got to watch the Shakur Stevenson fight live. That was the only fight I was really, to be honest with you, interested in watching. I watched all the other fights on replay. Yeah, I mean, Berlanga, we all know he has a lot of power. However, I want to see, him getting into a fight with a more prominent opponent and go a couple of rounds and kind of test him out and see if he really is equipped to be a star in the ring, because he's already a star outside of the ring. He's got celebrities hanging out with him all the time now, like Fat Joe and a bunch of other people, that are around him that really, really are invested, not financially, but emotionally into his character. They feel like this kid is going to be a star moving forward. I'd love to watch him versus, Caleb Plant. I think that would be a great fight if they can make that happen. That would be a very good fight. Two very heavy-handed fighters. As far as Felix, I don't think he ever comes back from that loss. He already had that loss against Lozado where he was winning and then he got knocked down, and then ref ended up stopping that fight. I think with this loss now, I think that mentally he's never going to recover. I think this is the end of him, to be honest with you. I hope not, but I believe that he's never going to. And Cortney's right. A lot of these boxers cannot overcome some of these losses. It's just, it's in their head all the time. Like even when he was mentioning about Anthony Joshua versus Ruiz, the second fight, that he was timid, that he didn't want to engage much. He was fighting on the outside. He was doing that for a reason. Psychologically, he had that first fight in his mind, right? And I think Felix is done because psychologically, he's just going to think about those two losses, and I don't think I don't think he's got the fortitude to be able to overcome it mentally. So, but we'll see. As far as Shakur Stevenson, the kid's just a fantastic fighter. We've watched him in the last 2 years grow physically. This kid is a star. We already know that. He's in my opinion, the future of boxing. He posted something up on his Instagram. He's becoming more confident each moment. He's maturing a lot, not just mentally, but obviously physically. He's going to give us a lot of great fights in the next 10 to 15 years. So, I'm enjoying watching him. I just feel like out of all the boxers right now, in all divisions, I just think that he's got every skill set, every arsenal, every tool in his bag, and I just wish he was a little bit more outside of the ring, more, a different character, because he doesn't seem like he's a controversial type of fighter or a controversial type of person. I'd like to see him be more like, more like I guess a loudmouth, but he's not. He's a very class act. He's a classy fighter, and a lot of it has to do probably with, Andre Ward and Bud Crawford being in his corner for a very long time. Imagine you having those two guys as your mentors. Like, how do you not succeed with that skill set, right? Those guys have tamed him because he did get into some problems a couple of years ago in Florida, and he leans on them for a lot of advice, which is great because Andre Ward's more of like a level-headed type guy. You can tell. Bud is too, but in the ring, Bud and Andre are different type of fighters. But to get two different perspectives from a Hall of Famer and a future Hall of Famer at that early in your career, at that age for the past 2-3 years, that's amazing, right? That puts him in a win-win situation. So they're obviously going to carve out a great career for him. I have high hopes for this kid, like high hopes. just based on what he's performed in the last couple of years. Just incredible. Like I can't. Like he's the boxer that has impressed me the most. Even, and you guys know I'm big on Lomachenko. Shakur Stevenson, I'm so big on him. Like I put in my head of Lomachenko in terms of skill set. Literally do. And I know that some people might disagree with me, but that's all right. You know, we'll see in the next couple of years. That's pretty much it.
Hey, Cortney, shout out to that dude that bet the house. He said, bet the house on an upset.
Man.
Who said that?
I want to say something real quick in relation to Berlanga. And I know it's also been a big topic in the group because the Camacho documentary just came out on Showtime. I don't know how many of y'all caught that, but I was saying for a while that I saw a lot of Camacho and Teofimo Lopez for how Teofimo Camacho pretty much brought that hip hop culture to boxing and ushered it into that era and became a trendsetter to what would have followed. And I feel like I gave Teofimo Lopez that comparison because he's kind of ushering in that millennialism into boxing that we're starting to see other boxers follow. You know what I'm saying? As far as the Fortnite and some of the other stuff that he does to kind of reach out, but I got to come back from that, man. After seeing Berlanga, and just seeing Berlanga and how he acted, and how he conducted himself during the interview, and what Mike has said as far as the celebrities he's associating with out there on the East Coast and stuff like that. I'm backing off and saying that Teofimo is the reincarnation of Camacho, and I'm going to give that mantle to Edgar Berlanga.
He's got some big heavy hitters behind him. I'm gonna tell you right now. I watched a couple of people that I actually know from the real estate industry that are big, and like he's got big people around him, not just Fat Joe. There's a lot of celebrities that are interested in Berlanga right now, that are around him all the time. And these are top producers in the music industry, not just artists. A lot of guys out there. So he's hanging around with some heavy people. Like once he breaks that stardom in the ring, he'll be able to fill up Madison Square Garden with no problem. No problem.
Great stuff. Yeah, man, it's going to be really exciting to see where it goes from here for Edgar Berlanga. Very exciting career. That's going to be it for episode 63. Thank you again for my base panelists, Tommy Rose Jr., Cortney Tanner.
Hey, let me get a shout out before we go on. Hey, I want to shout out to Anthony Stack Saldana.
Oh yeah,
and his wife Cynthia, who are battling COVID right now. Hey man, stay strong. We love you, everybody at Just Boxing. Our hearts and our prayers are going out to you as you and your family battle this. And I want to say that my heart is is filled with joy right now that we got Michael Gomes Gomes back after his battle with the disease and this pandemic that it continues to rage throughout our communities and affect us all. Hey guys, please be safe out there. Social distance, wear masks, and love yourselves, love on each other, and it's together we're gonna get through this. Hey Stacks, we love you. Hey, please get well soon, man.
Yeah, my thoughts on that. Me and Cortney, we met Anthony in person numerous times. I met Cynthia in person. They're great, naturally good people in general, and it just breaks my heart to see that they're dealing with this. But yeah, as Cortney said, our thoughts and our deepest thoughts and best wishes as they battle this the sickness. And Gomes, since Cortney mentioned it, we already knew this, but since it's already out there, you recently battled COVID, and thank goodness you were able to prevail from that. Just to segue for a little bit, how did you prevail? How did you get through that? What was day-to-day like, and how did you persevere from that whole ordeal?
At first, well, my experience, which is different than many people, but when at first, like, I'm like, oh, I got this. The first 2-3 days were quite simple, other than just body aches and fever, and that went away after like the second day. But I was progressing, and then I digressed a couple of days later, and I got worse, and like it drains you. So that's the problem with the virus. Like with everybody that I've had conversations, and right now I know a good amount of people, including my wife, had it. My mother-in-law ended up having it. They all got it from me, and a couple of people at my office got it, who I caught from them. But it does drain all of your energy. There was 2 days that I can't even tell you. I can't even remember those 2 days because I literally just laid in bed and I couldn't get up. I was there, and and it sucked because mentally you're thinking like, all right, I'm healthy. I'm gonna overcome this. And then, when you start struggling with it, you're like, shit, am I gonna overcome? And then you have, obviously, if you're watching the news, at that time there's like a little bit less than 200,000 people. You start to think, what if I'm a number? What if you become that statistic? But, it wasn't easy. But it hits other people differently. My wife was able to walk right through it. With me, I had nauseousness for a couple of days. I was drained. I had brain fog for 4 or 5 days. I had a headache that was so pounding. I've never experienced something like that in my life in the past. Like, think of a migraine, multiply it times 5, and that's what it is. And I'm a healthy person. Thankfully, I'm healthy, and obviously that plays a big part in this. But if you're not healthy, if you have underlying conditions, you're going to struggle with it for sure. You're going to get drained. You're going to experience things that you probably haven't experienced. It gives you a lot of backaches, and people are like, why do I have a backache? It's because it affects your kidneys. It's attacking your organs as well. So that's why people have backaches. It's not because it has nothing to do with your back. It's just your kidneys are located right there, and that's what ends up happening. It puts a lot of pressure on it. My recommendation is drink a lot of water, drink a lot of vitamin C, and take it easy, because you can't be active, because like I told you, it drains you. If you're trying to run around the park while you have it, unless you're in tip-top shape like an athlete, that's different. But we're not. The athletes are in obviously great shape for a reason, but we're not. You got to take it. You got to take it easy. You got to rest. And you got to make sure that after you have it and you beat it, you don't know. There isn't enough evidence yet that doesn't say or says that we can't get it again. So that's the biggest problem. The problem is that we are not aware if we can. If you actually look at the CDC website and look at COVID-19, they don't have enough supporting evidence to state that even if you tested positive for the antibodies, which I have, that you're not susceptible of getting it again 3-4 months later. You could. So you got to be careful. A couple of people in my office are struggling with it right now. I have 140 employees. For those who don't know, I'm the chief operating officer of a pretty big company, and some of my agents are struggling with it. So you have to be very careful. This is not a joke. I took it as a joke in the beginning. I can tell you right now, it's not a joke. My heart goes out to Cynthia and Stacks and Anthony. I know that God will prevail in the end, and they'll be fine.
Thank you for sharing. And yeah, again, our thoughts again goes out to Anthony and Cynthia. Tiffanie, thank you for joining us, being a guest panelist. Any last thoughts you want to share with us before we end it?
No, thank you guys for having me on. As usual, I always have a great time with you guys. So I appreciate you for the invite, and looking forward to catching more of your podcasts.
Great. And back to Tommy and Cortney. Any last thoughts before we end it?
Hey man, just like everybody else said, prayers to Anthony and Cynthia, the Saldana family. Absolutely glad to have Gomes, MG, the great back, getting back at it. Everybody be safe with this pandemic. Do the right thing, wash your hands, sanitize stuff, your remotes, your refrigerator door handles, everything, your steering wheels, any and everything that, has common contact and a lot of, touching and passing through those things. Just be very careful, wear your mask. I'm constantly rocking my Corona mask every day. So, I'll keep that on. But yeah, I mean, besides that, I mean, just get ready for this pound for pound voting, because it's gonna get real here soon to finish this year out. So I'm definitely ready for that.
Yes, since Tommy mentioned it, the pound for pound top 10 voting will happen very soon on our Facebook group, Pound for Pound, and on our website. So check that out. Again, this is episode 63, wrapping it up. Again, one final thank you to Tommy, Cortney, Michael, and Tiffanie. Everyone else, thank you for watching and chopping it up with some good boxing talk. I'm Aaron Soriao from Los Angeles. Have a good night, everyone.
Canelo Stoic.